Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Vitality Blueprint podcast. Today's guest is a very special one. It's Dr. Anthony Chaffee. He is a medical doctor and he's also an advocate for the carnivore diet. And he's all around a very, very nice guy, and he's an industry leader as well, which is awesome to have him on. So welcome on today, man.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No worries at all. I just really wanted to start off, I guess, by asking you what was the switch for you that made you start looking into, alternative nutrition and, going away from the standard food pyramid that everyone's taught in the modern world?
Well, I never really paid much attention to the food pyramid. It just never really interested me. I ate the way my parents brought me up, which was home cooked meals or every meal. We always had meat. We always had meat and vegetables and some carbohydrates, and that's what we tried to cover, that so-called balanced diet. And so that's what my mom tried to do. And so we always sort of tried to do that. I always gravitated towards the meat just naturally. I always preferred that. I always felt best on that. I hated the vegetables. They tasted disgusting. And so I was the quintessential kid that just refused to eat vegetables because they tasted bad. And, you think about it from a biological point of view or evolutionary point of view. Why would we have evolved to hate the taste of something that's good for us? That's actually those bad tastes, that bitter taste is actually our brain warning us that there are harmful chemicals in there. I didn't know it at the time, but that's intuitively what kids understand, and that's why they don't want to eat their vegetables.
Yeah.
There are things that taste good that aren't necessarily good for you. You got food scientists that are very good at making things taste good, even though they're junk and garbage. And then sugar is what's called an evolutionary trap, which is something that we recognize that, ooh, that's safe, we can eat that, that's okay. But now it's just massively overdosed. We never would have found sugar in that quantity, except maybe you get some honey, but you got to fight bees, and you can die from getting stung by a swarm of bees. And so you're not going to find that all day, every day, like you can with sugar here. And it's seasonal, right? So in the winter, you're not going to find that stuff. So the list goes on. But we get something that tastes good. It's not necessarily good for us, but if something tastes bad, it is necessarily bad for us. There's even a book called The Most Delicious Poisons, which is all about spices and seasonings and how these are actually the most toxic components of the plants. And that's why it's such a sharp flavor. It's not that the plant has such a strong flavor, it's that our brain is responding to that chemical and saying, no, don't eat it, spit it out. Yeah. And so I came to the way I eat because of that, really, because I was learning how plants have inherent toxins that they use to stop animals and insects from eating them. And I was taking cancer biology at the University of Washington in Seattle, and our cancer biology professor told us this and said, hey, look, this is how plants defend themselves. Plants make a million different chemicals that are defensive in orient, and they don't want you to eat them. And so they try to stop you, and this is how they do it. And we were looking at things from a cancer perspective, so we were looking at carcinogens, and there had been dozens, if not over 100 carcinogens identified in all the different produce items that we would eat. Now, not all of these would be necessary anything that says, oh, if you eat this in this amount, it will cause this cancer, but it's just the things that are pro-carcinogenic. So you look at things in animal studies and in mammals and other sorts of test subjects, and that would predispose them or make them more likely to get cancer. So that's what we were learning. And we learned that Brussels sprouts had 136 identified carcinogens at the time. This was 24 years ago. Mushrooms had over 100, and spinach and broccoli and kale and lettuce and cucumbers and all these other things had dozens as well. And we were quite taken aback by that. We thought that he was joking. We thought he must be joking because that was a pretty strange thing to hear when you've been told your whole life that vegetables are good for you, even though we all hate them. And so eventually we sort of realized that he was serious. And I remember thinking in my head, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he looked at us and he just gave us a funny look and he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. I was like, okay, all right, I'm just not going to eat plants anymore. And so I went to the store and I just saw everything in the grocery store was made with or out of plants. And So I just came across eggs. I was like, okay, eggs. I'll eat some eggs. And I came across some meat. Okay, I'll eat some meat. I didn't realize how significant what I was doing was. But if you look back at the biological past of humans and pre-humans, we have been apex predators, carnivores, for millions of years, and we've been close to it since then. Before that, we were opportunistic meat eaters. We would eat meat when and as it became available, and we would eat plants when we couldn't, and we still do that even to today. Like hunter-gatherer populations, such as the Native Australians, Native Americans, if they weren't able to get a kill or hunt from their hunt, then they would eat different plants and gather things up. But if they were successful at hunting, they generally would just eat meat. And certainly during the ice ages, what else is there to eat? It's just meat. And we had a lot of megafauna, mammoths and mastodons and giant sloths to go after. Meat was plentiful. So I didn't figure that out until later. I mean, I learned as a kid that this is the case, that we're apex predators, top of the food chain. That's biologically the kind of animal that we are, and that all animals have a natural specific diet that is appropriate for them. But no one really puts that into a human context. Well, what's our most appropriate diet? What's our species specific diet? And that wasn't something that I figured out until later, but I felt amazing. I've never felt better in my entire life. I had better energy, better endurance, better athleticism. My brain worked better. I didn't have any brain fog. I was able to do extraordinarily well in my classes, better than I had been doing before. I was always a good student, but it just became even easier. And I never got sick. I was normally sick all the time. I would get I'd get a cold every month, at least. I get like 2 colds a month. And my friends would just joke that I was just sick all the time. And now I wasn't. I wasn't sick for years after that, until I started slipping off of it, and then I started getting sick again. And then about 6 years ago, I sort of just came across information that showed that no, just humans really are carnivores. That's just the kind of animal that we are, and that's how I was eating, and that's when I felt amazing. And I said, okay, well, let's think about this. That's our biologically appropriate diet. I felt better than ever. And all animals have a species-specific diet. And thinking as a doctor that we are carnivores that aren't eating as such. We're eating a lot of plants that have defense chemicals, that have toxins, that can be deleterious to our health. And we're not taking that into consideration. We're becoming more and more plant-based as we go, and people are getting more and more sick and unwell.
Correct. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so I looked at that, and then things in medicine just started slotting into place. These non-communicable chronic diseases that are just getting more and more and more prevalent. That made sense now that was why we're eating things that we're not designed to eat, and our bodies are starting to go in a negative direction. We have experimental data on this with different dietary changes, such as ketogenic diets, which aren't really tested for vegetarian ketogenic diets, because you're not really going to get an appropriate energy source without carbohydrates on a plant-based diet, and be very deficient in nutrients. You'd have to supplement heavily, so it's not really something that's easy to do. So what have these studies done? They're starting with high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets, and they're showing massive increases in health and improvements in biomarkers, improvements in multiple different specific disease states, and actually found we can reverse disease and reverse disease outcomes in a number of cases as well by putting people on these diets. So that was my sort of main interest in this, was how can I help my patients? How can I help people get healthy so they don't need all this medicine? In medical school, we're just taught, here's a problem, here's a pill. And that's how we're taught. We're taught pharmacology. We're just taught, hey, here's blood pressure, here's all these blood pressure medications, start with this, go to this, go to this, go to this, go to this. And that's it. You don't look at what is causing this. There are some causes of high blood pressure that we know of, but after you investigate for those, you just say it's idiopathic, just put them on medication. Whereas when you just change their diet, they largely will improve their blood pressure and maybe not need it, maybe not need the medication. I get more patients off medications than I put on medications. Let's put it that way. And so
it's very rare for a doctor to be able to say that.
But that's the way it should be. We shouldn't have all
exactly right.
But that's how we're trained. We're trained to just put people on more and more pills, more and more pills. thankfully, when I was going through, they warned us specifically not to do that, not to go down these prescription cascades where you prescribe somebody for high blood pressure, and then they get something for nausea, then they get something for some of the side effects of that pill, and then next pill, and the next pill, and the next pill. And it all started with just that one pill for high blood pressure.
And it could have just been, corrected through simple lifestyle changes like nutrition, right?
Yeah, or just go to the origin and say, okay, well, that pill didn't work for you. Let's try a different one. But instead they'll just add more pills to it. There was a whistleblower, I believe it was Callie Means, who said this, and he was in a conversation with a pharmaceutical executive who asked the rhetorical question, do you know what my favorite drug is that our company produces? And they're like, oh, something that helps kids with cancer or something, actually, laudable.
Yeah.
It said, no, my favorite drugs that our company produces are drugs that cause side effects that we have drugs that treat. Right? That's what they care about. They don't care about our health. They want to make money, and that's their prerogative. But we need to understand that, and we need to understand that this isn't a charity. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're not trying to save humanity. They're trying to help themselves and their bottom line. And as long as we understand that and we're aware of that, then we can use their services safely and effectively. Or more so, we'll be more protected from it. But we can't just trust that they know best. No, you don't. You never put your health in the hands of anybody else. You need to make your own decisions, because you're the one paying the price. You never put the decision making abilities in someone's hands that pays no price for being wrong. If they're wrong and you die, you're the one who dies. It doesn't matter. So that's the important thing. So that was another thing too. Goldman Sachs, they had so part of their meeting was leaked. It was like this little slide from one of their meetings, and it said that it asked the question. It said, "Is curing diseases a viable business model?" Right. So if you get rid of blood pressure problems, well, then we can't sell people high blood pressure medications. Right. If we cure cancer, if we cure diabetes, if we cure autoimmunity, well, then we can't sell people medications for the rest of their life. These are non-communicable chronic diseases. It's defined as diseases that cannot be passed and transferred from one party to another. And yet we see this showing up in the animal populations and domestic pets, and then zoo animals that are not fed their natural diet. They're getting diabetes and cancer and osteoporosis and autoimmunity and things like that. We call them human diseases. Why are they getting human diseases? They're not catching it from us by definition. It only happens when they are fed an inappropriate diet. So why would we assume that it's any different for us? We're being fed an inappropriate diet for humans, and we're getting these diseases that we see when animals are fed inappropriate diets. And so they're happy with that. They're happy with us doing that because they're heavily invested in each other. The food industry and the pharmaceutical industry are heavily invested in each other. The food industry puts out the vast majority of nutritional research and content. They spend vast sums and far more than any public institution on nutritional research. For instance, Coca-Cola spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research than the NIH. And so that's just Coca-Cola. That's not Pepsi and Kellogg's and Nestle. So they're the ones putting this stuff out there, and they're the ones saying that, well, plant-based is the best. Well, why are they saying that? Because they know that when people go plant-based, they don't eat quinoa salads. They eat cornflakes and Twinkies.
Yeah. I was about to say, did you see the Kellogg CEO come out, about a week ago, recommending cereal for dinner?
That's it.
Of course he's going to recommend cereal. It's not for your health he's recommending it, right? It's for the shareholders in the company, and they have an incentive to recommend these things, and you can see it across all the industries that are linked together, like you said, pharmaceutical, hospital, even the private sector with food companies and everything like that. They're all incentivizing the same thing, which is to make more money. And you can see it everywhere. And once you see it in one place, you do really see it in everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spend trillions of dollars on things like Kellogg cereals and Coca-Cola and all the sugar and processed garbage. It makes us sick. And then we spend many more trillions treating the effects of the consumption of this ultra-processed garbage. It's not even food, it's garbage.
Yeah.
Food is species specific. Grasses, or certain grasses, are food to a cow. Eucalyptus is food to koala, but eucalyptus is not food to a cow. So that's garbage to a cow. That's poisonous to a cow. It's toxic to a cow. So we need to think about along the same lines. What are we designed for? What are we designed to eat? That's food for us. Anything else outside of that may be used as survival, but that's not food for us. It's just something that we can get by on and not die. If we need to for survival, yeah. But sometimes we do die. Sometimes these things do kill us, and we get sublethal exposure to these plant toxins that can harm us. That can harm us seriously. And so we then get this low-grade sublethal but clinically significant level of harm, and then we need to use all these medications to treat all this stuff, and that costs many more trillions. For instance, there was a study, Christmas, where was it? It was WHO. I think it was WHO put this out, where the five common NCDs, so non-communicable diseases, these so-called chronic diseases, non-communicable chronic diseases, which I think are really just toxicities and malnutrition from eating the wrong things. But those top five, that accounted for the treatment of those, accounted for $14.5 trillion in 2010. So just trillion with a T, right? And that's worldwide. And they're estimating that that's going to double by 2030. And then you look at just lost wages and lost productivity, the loss in human costs of productivity. It's estimated to be about $46 trillion between 2010 and 2030. And then just lives lost, the cost of people dying early and not being well for the last decades of their life is estimated to be about $23 trillion between 2010 and 2030. These are massive sums that we are either paying or losing out on. And at least for the ones we're paying, like the lost wages, the lost productivity, that's just potential that's not being realized. But at the very least, when we're spending $15 to $30 trillion a year worldwide treating these 5 NCDs directly, someone's getting that money, right?
Yeah, and so it's going somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's it. So that's a massive industry. And now these people have $15 to $30 trillion a year to toy with, and to buy politicians, and to pay for marketing campaigns and studies that are really basically part of their marketing budget to push their product and push a narrative that they want to see. I mean, just Pepsi alone, their marketing budget is $2 billion a year. And it's just Pepsi. And so they're marketing for that. Now, is that how much they include on the nutritional studies and research that they put out and that are complete garbage and just push the narrative that sugar and artificial sweeteners like aspartame are all super good and nice for you because that's their product? Is that part of that $2 billion budget? I bet you it's not, but I would consider that part of their marketing, because that's all it is. It's just marketing. They're just pushing a product.
Yeah, for sure. And in the health, in the medical sector, especially in Australia and America especially, really, you see them, like you said, they never really address lifestyle and address diet and everything like that. They're only going for prescription pills. So my question was, for you, how do you go about prescribing people alternative to, say, nutrition plan, and recommending eating red meat and eating a species appropriate diet, rather than going down the standard route of eat your 6 servings of grain, have your cornflakes for breakfast and dinner, and have 10 prescription pills to wash it all down?
Yeah, well, I have a pretty specific practice. So I mean, I have a private practice in functional medicine. So people come to me when they're not really too satisfied with their primary care provider, and they're going to them saying, look, I don't feel well, I don't feel good, I'm on all these pills and I feel like garbage. Is there anything else I can do? And they say, oh, your bloods look fine, you're just on these pills, it's just your life now. And most people don't accept that, and thankfully so. And so they come to me and say, okay, well, what the hell, can we do something different? And of course you can. And I always preface it by saying, look, we can use medicine, and I still do use medicine. I'm an allopathic doctor. I do believe that medicines can be extremely beneficial. Certain medicines in certain circumstances can be very beneficial, but you don't just use them as a crutch. Good example of this, we've been using ketogenic diets for 100 years for kids with epilepsy, and just people with epilepsy in general, but kids in particular. And there are a lot of studies on this. There are a lot of experimental data showing the benefits and efficacy of ketogenic diets for treating epilepsy. And this was the main treatment in people and children in particular with epilepsy for decades, until we came up with pharmacological interventions that seemed to do a good job as well. And then people just got lazy, and they just said, oh, look, it's hard to tell people what to eat. It's easier just to give them a pill. The pills work, work good, so that's fine. Not thinking for a second, then like, look, maybe these things have side effects, maybe things have consequences, maybe they're not as good in that regard, and maybe we try the diet first because that's going to make them healthier anyway. And not that they necessarily knew that at the time, but let's try this, something that's a more natural sort of approach, that you let your body just, think about that. If you're removing carbohydrates and this makes your epilepsy go away, and you add in carbohydrates and epilepsy comes back, wouldn't you think for a second that it may be something to do with the carbohydrates that's precipitating and causing the epilepsy in the first place? Why would you not think about that? Why would you not address that and say, hey, look, yes, if you get shot, we can stitch you up. But how about let's just not shoot you in the first place? How about that? Wow, no. I mean, people just really can't be told what to do, and if they just want to shoot themselves, they want to shoot themselves. And we're here to help. That's the attitude. You're not addressing the root cause. You're not trying to prevent this from happening. So that's the idea. This is preventative medicine, prospective medicine. We're looking out ahead of what could be a problem, and we're stopping it now so it doesn't become one. As opposed to retrospective medicine, this is a disaster, this is horrible, so let's pick up the pieces. I just don't think that that's the right model. And so I preface my consultations with new patients by saying that diet and lifestyle are 95% of the interventions that we're going to do. And we have medications and things like that can help augment situations. Or maybe, look, someone has fulminant disease like diabetes or autoimmunity. There's medications that can help with those situations, and then you put the dietary interventions in play, and then they get better and better, and you can take them off medication. That's the idea, is to then take them off medication. But that medication is a good gateway, crutch, bridge to
more
getting
of a short-term tool, right?
Yeah, or if they're already on them, I wouldn't say, hey, let's come off right away and then just do diet. Make sure that's an appropriate time to start coming off medications. So these medications do help, but they're not addressing the underlying issue, and that's the problem that I have with it.
For sure. And then when you never really address the underlying issue, you just continue to apply these band-aid solutions, right? And then before you know it, you're taking 20 pills, and then you're still having a myriad of issues with your overall health, which could just be addressed by, like you said, actually solving the root cause of the problem, which 9 times out of 10 is their lifestyle, even more than 9 times out of 10, in my opinion. It's very, very likely that the lifestyle and the nutrition's really the biggest one, and you see it not just in physical ailments, but also mental, in my opinion as well. A lot of these new wave of mental disorders that we see everywhere, in my opinion, is caused by poor lifestyle, of always staying inside, looking at screens, always eating, junk food, like literal garbage food. Doesn't provide any nutritional benefit. There's literally, it's just void of everything. And it's all like frankenfoods. It's all fake things made in a laboratory. pumped up with preservatives and, red dye 40 and like colored in every different way, like your Skittles and everything like that. It's providing absolutely no nutritional benefit, where you could just eat some eggs or some steak or some ground beef, and you'll be feeling 100 times better. You're actually getting a lot of vitamins and minerals that you actually need to not just survive, because you can survive on Skittles, but your quality of life is going to deteriorate very rapidly, right? But you actually start thriving, and you actually feel good. You'll actually have energy. You'll be able to perform in, sport, or just you'll be able to walk without pain. You'll be able to go for runs. You'll be able to spend more time with your family and actually enjoy that time just from changing, what you're putting in your mouth. And that seems to be the biggest issue with modern society now, is everyone is not concerned with what they put in their mouth, and they're more concerned of putting pills in their mouth to fix the issue, and you can see that. I wanted to get your opinion on Ozempic or, semaglutide injections. You can see that everywhere with that.
Yeah. No, I think they're absolutely awful. I would never give my patient anything like that ever. I mean, I certainly not for weight loss. And I don't treat diabetes from a medical standpoint apart from nutritional interventions, because why would you? It's been shown in clinical trials in humans that if you just people on a high fat ketogenic diet, which a carnivore diet is, then you can reverse type 2 diabetes. And I couldn't even tell you how many patients that I have at this point in my clinic, not just people I've spoken to online that have reversed diabetes, but in my clinic that I've tracked their bloods and confirmed that their diabetes is gone now, that have done this, that have reversed their diabetes. It's just insane. So, I would never give somebody a drug when just changing their diet can have a better effect. Specifically for Ozempic, for weight loss, I think that's an absolute disaster. Certainly some people are going to have weight loss on it, but the studies show that the weight loss that they get is not just fat loss. People want to want to lose weight.
Right.
You want to lose fat, right? You want to lose excess adipose tissue. That's what you want to lose. You want to look slim and feel healthy and be more attractive, if that's what you're interested in. And a lot of people are, which is why they're subjecting themselves to medical treatments that can be life-threatening. People have died from using Ozempic. People have died from doing bariatric surgery and having complications after that are very, very harmful to their life and their health. So these are very, very dangerous procedures. Percentage-wise, it's you're more likely to not get a permanent injury or die from these things, but you are taking that risk, right? And so, to me, I don't think that that's appropriate to put anybody on that. And also for the fact that you're losing weight, but you're not losing just fat. So the people that go on these things, they actually show that they lose a large amount of lean body mass tissue. So they're losing muscle mass, they're losing bone density, and they're losing fat. You can't afford to lose muscle mass and bone density, especially as you're aging. You have this aging population. Sarcopenia, which is muscle atrophy and wasting in the elderly, is an absolute epidemic, and that is directly related to all-cause mortality. Like, people die more often when they're old and skinny and frail and don't have a lot of muscle mass and bone density. So you're going on Ozempic and you're losing weight, but a lot of that is going to be lean body mass that you cannot afford to lose. Now, what is some of the main reasons why people lose weight? Because it makes them so physically ill that they cannot stomach food, and so they're basically just starving themselves. They just can't eat, and so the stuff that they do eat is crap, right? So they're getting worse eating habits as a result of this. Well, generally, for most people, that nausea goes away, and then their appetite returns after a certain time, usually 18 months to 2 years. Their appetite comes back. They have horrible eating habits because it didn't matter really what they ate, because they just weren't eating enough to keep themselves, together, and they just start slamming on weight. Biochemically, it changes your fat cells. It actually makes your fat cells split and divide. You have more fat cells, and now they're primed and ready just to take in fat and explode. So the studies on Ozempic from the drug manufacturers showed that you lose a bunch of weight, sure, not all fat, a lot of it's muscle and bone, but then after 2 years, people would regain more weight than they lost, and this is fat that they're gaining back. So you lose muscle and you gain fat, and that's after 2 years. This is literally this is like the quintessential deal with the devil that we see in fables and cautionary tales going back hundreds of years. Don't do this kind of deal. Looks nice at first, but you're getting bit on the back end. The devil always gets his due. And so, you're saying that well, okay, I want to lose weight, yes, but you have to sell your soul. And yeah. Details. This is what I want, And so you're losing weight now, but most of that's muscle, or a lot of that's muscle. Some of it's bone, some of it's fat. You're sick as hell all the time. You're less healthy. And then you gain back more bloody fat than you lost in total weight in the first place. So you come out at the end of it. So you have this 2-year period where it's just like, oh, hey, look at this. I lost all this weight. And now you're regained more weight and you're worse off than where you started. That's not where you want to be. So I'm very much against using Ozempic, certainly for weight loss. If people want to use it in diabetes, that's up to the provider who is prescribing that. I think it's a very bad idea for weight loss, and for diabetes, it's just unnecessary at this point. We have clinical trials. It's not just me saying this because I've seen this happen in patients. This is large clinical trials in humans showing that you can reverse type 2 diabetes and put this into remission and get people off medication, and specifically on a carnivore diet. There's a study out of Harvard with over 2,000 patients, and they had a large cohort of diabetics on there, all on the carnivore diet for at least 6 months, and they showed that, self-reported, but all of these nutritional studies are self-reported survey studies. So anyone who says, oh, but that's survey epidemiological studies, it's exactly as good as every other nutritional study on plant-based diets, because it's the exact same format. You just give a survey and you ask questions and you see what people say. So all these other surveys are exactly the same. And they found that 100% of diabetics came off 100% of their injectable medications, and most of them had came off most of their other oral medications as well, and significantly improved or even put it into full remission, as well as so many other issues like autoimmunity and weight loss and other sorts of health outcomes and clear endpoints. So that's something that is simple to do and has a much greater effect than even these medications. It may not be easy. It may not be easy for people to do this and change their lifestyle in this way, but it is simple. It is straightforward. It's like you just do this, you eat this, you don't eat anything else.
Yeah.
And these problems go away, and that's largely what we see.
Yeah, it's literally as simple as it gets. It's stop eating this huge group of things and just eat this very small, eat these things, and you're going to, every single marker of your health is going to improve, and whereas like the semaglutide style sort of thing, it's not just ignoring, the root cause of the issue, but it's actually encouraging it, because their eating habits, like you said, get even worse. And then afterwards, they're putting on even more weight than they started with, so it's the most short-sighted answer and solution, currently available. But it's easy, right? And it's very, very easy because you just take the injections, right? And you don't have to change anything else. And that's how it's marketed and sold. And, you see these huge transformations of these people losing, 80 pounds and things. And you're, oh, it's that easy. I'm going to try it out. But you don't usually see in the marketing, the actual fallback from that, 2 years down the line when they put all the weight back on. They've lost their connective tissue, their bone density, muscle mass, and now they're looking even worse. And their health markers are much worse than they begin with. So it's definitely not a advisable sort of solution to take.
I certainly wouldn't advise it anyway. Obviously, this is being prescribed en masse all over the world. I mean, they've had global shortages and pharmacies selling out and then saying, okay, look, we're not selling this to people for weight loss. It has to be for diabetes. We don't have stock and things like that. So it's like you say, it's not addressing the root cause. In fact, it's exacerbating it because they're getting worse eating habits or eating worse things. And then when they do start eating again, it's a disaster. So, and also, while you can get energy, derive energy from things like Skittles and things like that, it doesn't have the nutritional content that's required, and you will get very sick and die from nutritional deficiencies in fairly short order. It's not going to be days, but could be weeks. And so that's not what you want to do for optimal health. So that's the other thing too. I'm talking optimal health. I'm not saying certainly people can survive and say, well, but look, there's these vegans are doing. That's fine. People can eat whatever the hell they want. But what I'm saying is, I'm talking about optimal. What is optimal for people to eat? What is the best thing that they can eat for their body? And that, to me, is very clear that that's an animal-based diet, high in animal fats, and lacking in plants of all description, because they have these different chemicals and toxins. We don't need any of them. There's nothing in plants that we have to have that we can't get from meat, but there are things in meat that we have to have that we can't get from plants. Oh, you can supplement. Fine. But you know what you can't do? You can't detoxify everything that's in plants. And those things all do cause harm. And people can quibble and argue over how much harm that actually causes. But when we see populations adopt a more Western diet, a more plant-based diet, and go away from meat and into plants, they get sicker. They get these chronic diseases. They get the diabetes, the cancers, the autoimmunities, the heart disease, and Alzheimer's, and these other diseases. How do I know that? Because we've seen it happen in every single population that has switched to an agrarian-based diet. There are textbooks from Cambridge and other universities showing the disparity in fossils immediately before and immediately after agriculture. They were taller, they were healthier, they had no signs of chronic disease, arthritis, osteoporosis, poor wound healing, infectious disease. They had big, strong, wide jaws, straight teeth, all their wisdom teeth. Their brains were 11% smaller for men, larger for men pre-agriculture, and 17% larger for women pre-agriculture. And then they shrank by 11 and 17% immediately after the advent of agriculture. And that's not worldwide. That's in those specific populations that switched from a pre-agriculture to an agrarian capacity. And it happened overnight. And then we saw that in every single instance all over the world that did this. There are, I think it's 7 independent places around the world where people started cultivating crops and going to agriculture. This exact same disparity of reduced height and reduced health and reduced brain size and dental development happened at the exact same time immediately when people went to a plant-based, a plant agricultural form of society, as opposed to a hunter-gatherer past. So that happened everywhere. And then more recently, Native Australians, Native Americans, there are examples of agriculture in isolated areas, but the vast majority of both populations were hunting. And they would gather different sorts of things. They knew which plants to eat if they couldn't get a kill, but then they generally just ate the meat. They weren't just eating a bunch of stews with potatoes and all that sort of stuff. By and large, this was mostly, obviously there are individuals that differed from that, but the large majority of people, according to the records from the European explorers and the European missionaries that went and tried to bring Christianity to these peoples, this is what they said and recorded. The Native Americans eating bison in the Great Plains of America. There's over 100 million bison roaming through the middle of America, which actually made the middle of America the most verdant and fertile area in the world, or one of them. And they were eating just bison. And there's a study in 2001 that showed that at the time they were the tallest population of humans on Earth. And they were very healthy. They didn't have all these chronic diseases and health issues and problems. And then, we wiped out the bison in order to cut off the food supply to the Native Americans and win the American Indian Wars. And people were encouraged to kill buffalo, and armies were sent out to sort of wipe these things out. And they did. And Buffalo Bill Hitchcock, was one of these figures, and they had posters up saying, a buffalo dead is an Indian dead, because this is what they eat all year, right? And so, pretty nasty stuff, but that's what happened. And as a result, they were forced to start eating other ways. They started eating a more Western diet. They started eating more agrarian foodstuffs. And what happened? Well, they shrank immediately and they became very sick. They have a much higher rate of chronic diseases in America than the rest of the population. Now, alcoholism and substance abuse may be a larger issue in those communities, depending on the different communities, but as a total aggregate for the country, probably worse in those communities. And that's certainly going to be deleterious to their health. But this is massive. It's like, I believe the numbers are about 4 times the rates of chronic diseases in Native American populations now that they're eating a more Western diet. And in fact, that's what I was taught as a kid. I actually saw this on as a child, that when eating a Western diet, Native Americans were 4 times as likely to get all the different non-communicable chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, autoimmunity, etc. And I remember thinking at the time, well, doesn't that mean the food is causing the disease? Because if they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease.
Yeah.
And we eat the food and we get the disease, we just get it at a lower rate. And what are they eating that we're not? What's a non-Western diet? Well, no one told me at the time, but they were just eating meat. They were eating high-fat meat, just like the Inuit. I remember seeing the Inuit videos of them just eating blubber.
Yeah.
And I was like, are they supposed to give you heart disease? And I'm like, what the hell is going on? It just didn't make sense to me. And so now that they're eating more agrarian-based diets, they've shrunk, their teeth are worse, their development is worse, their health is worse. So we see this everywhere. You see this everywhere. The Maasai, they were largely eating milk, blood, and meat in the early 19th century, early 1900s, and all before that. In the 1920s, they just started eating a bit more like grains and millet. And you contrast that with their neighbors, the Akikuyu, who were largely plant-based, and there's about 750,000 of them in that area at the time. And so it was a large population sample to look at. The British did a multi-year, in-depth study into the nutritional habits and disparities between these two populations, because it's a perfect case to study. You have people alive at the same time in the same area under the same conditions, and they interbreed and intermarry, so they were genetically similar, and they have very different diets, but they're not processed food garbage diets. I mean, all the studies saying, oh, look how good a plant-based diet is. They're comparing apples to oranges. They're comparing a processed food diet with more fruits and vegetables. Okay, well, no kidding, that's going to be better. But also there's healthy user bias, because people that are more likely to eat vegetables as opposed to processed crap, or less likely to smoke, they're less likely to drink, they're more likely to exercise, they're more likely to get rid of sugary drinks and all these sorts of things. So there's a healthy user bias as well. So this was very good because it didn't have any of that garbage confounding the issues. And they found that the Maasai were far and away the healthier peoples. And they looked at hospital records, they looked at medical records, but they also went from village to village to village, because those records are incomplete. It doesn't tell you how many people are sick and just didn't come in or couldn't get in because they were living so remotely. So they went to them, and they found that the Maasai were far and away the healthiest. The Maasai men were on average 5 inches taller. Same disparity, pre and post agriculture. They were 23 pounds heavier of lean body mass. They're stick skinny. They're just muscle and just lean muscle, and 50% stronger. They also didn't get all the diseases and infections and chronic diseases that the Akikuyu got. And the Akikuyu men were the least healthy. Akikuyu women were the next up, but still very unhealthy, a lot of health issues, but they had a more diverse diet. For some reason, the Akikuyu men just ate a whole bunch of grains. That was the main thing that they ate. And the women would eat some grains and also some leafy greens and things like that. So they got a bit more of a diverse diet. And then the Maasai women were far and away healthier than both of those. And then the Maasai men were even healthier than the Maasai women, because they ate more of the blood and the meat and less of the milk. They still ate a lot of milk, but they still had more blood and meat because they were the warrior class. They had to defend the herds and the people from lions and other tribes and things like that. So they needed to be the healthiest. And they were the healthiest. They were absolutely the healthiest. So we see this. And then we see throughout the 20th century, the Maasai getting worse. Their rates of chronic disease going up. There wasn't a single example of heart disease in the Maasai in that 1920s study that I saw. It was a 172-page book on the subject. The whole study was just massive. And then in the 1970s, you start seeing heart disease start showing up. Well, right, they're eating more grains, they're eating more processed foods, they're eating more plants, they're coming away from their traditional diet, and they're getting sick. That proves the point. That proves the theory that it's eating an biologically inappropriate diet that is causing these diseases. And then now they have much higher rates of diabetes and heart disease and other sorts of chronic diseases and illnesses because they're incorporating more of Western diet. They have Coca-Cola trucks go in to these little villages every day, and they sell out within 15 minutes. At least that's what Dr. Hyman saw when he was visiting there, and he sort of put videos out. That's like, this is crazy. Like, and he said he went up to the chieftain of that village, and he said, "Hey, look, this is really bad. Did you know that these things can cause diabetes and tooth decay and all these health problems?" And he was really upset by that. He's, "Oh, we actually have a really big problem with diabetes. Like, you think that's from the Coca-Cola?" He's like, "It's not helping, you know." And so
it's definitely not helping.
No, and so they're preying on these people that don't know that they need to avoid sugar. It just tastes good and it's addictive, and it's just like, ooh, yeah, let's get that. And they have no reason to suspect that it's not good for them, because they haven't been told, and they're not on iPhones and things like that. Some are, but the large majority of people just don't have that information yet, and we need to get it to them. So they're being preyed upon. They're being preyed upon by these unscrupulous companies. I mean, I did humanitarian work in Bangladesh. I worked in in a rural refugee camp, volunteered there as a doctor to help genocide survivors from the Rohingya genocide in Burma. And you're in the middle of a jungle, right? There's actual elephants and tigers and things like that in there. And it's actually right through an elephant migratory route. So there's like actual wild elephants going through the area. And yet, in the middle of this jungle, in the middle of a refugee camp, where no one had shoes, and they were living under tarps, like tents made out of tarps and little enclosures made out of tarps from the UN. They had Cheetos and Ruffles and gummy bears. Now, how the hell did those things get in there?
It's
and why the
hell
would you think that was the appropriate thing to give to these people that are in such dire straits? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I honestly think it's just criminal. And they were all throughout the villages as well. These little villages in the middle of the jungle. They had the traditional little, grass hut sort of storefronts that had traditional foods and bananas and different things like that. And then there's just bags of fun-sized chips and things like that. Not even like the big bags, it's like the small ones. And so these people are destitute, and they're spending what little money they have on this garbage. And then the plastic just gets thrown on the side of the road because there's no cleaning, or there's no trash service and dump. They don't have that sort of system in the rural areas of Bangladesh. And so they just sweep all this stuff up into piles, and they just burn all this plastic. It's just black, tarry smoke coming up. And it's just like, yeah, that's a great idea. Oh, yes, like cows are the ones destroying the environment.
Yeah, I know.
I bet. It's
outrageous. Yeah, it's absolutely outrageous. So, like, for you, obviously we know like what not to eat. So we're obviously not recommending Cheetos, don't drink Coca-Cola. Like, all of these things are pretty logical, right? And they're pretty obvious. But for someone that may be like listening, what's something you would recommend to, how to ease into this ideal way of living and the optimal way of living, like you say? What sort of foods would you recommend to base their overall, diet and nutrition around?
Well, I think you start it just like you say, like, hey, look, let's stay away from like the processed garbage, the sugary drinks and the added sugars and all that sort of stuff, and just get away from that. First of all, is eat whole foods, right? Real meat, real vegetables, real fruit, things like that. Start there, right? That's a very, if people just did that and weren't scared of meat, because that's another thing that bothers me, is that we have vilified meat for what the processed crap and sugar have done, right? Because that's documented. The sugar companies, the big food companies, they vilified meat, they vilified cholesterol in order to cast the blame away from themselves for the rise in heart disease, which is absolutely on them and not on meat. And that's a whole other chapter of life, but I have many videos discussing that, like the truth about cholesterol and heart disease. That's a good one if people are interested in. But just getting away from those things and not being afraid of meat and eating more fatty meat, because the fat's really important. It's an essential nutrient. It's actually a grouping of essential nutrients or essential fatty acids that you have to have, or you can get sick and you can die, or you not develop your brain properly and your body properly. Your hormones are all made out of cholesterol, all of them, right? So testosterone, estrogen, progestogens, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, like your cortisol, all these sorts of things, DHEA, pregnenolone, androstenedione, all these things, they're all derived from cholesterol. Even vitamin D is synthesized from cholesterol. So this is important, and your body makes it, but you may not make enough. And also, if you're eating plant oils, these polyunsaturated fats that have plant sterols, that are the plant's cholesterol, that's close enough to our cholesterol that our body thinks, oh, we have enough and we don't make enough. Well, that can hurt your vitamin D production. That can hurt your hormone production. So just thinking about that, and understanding that animal fat is good and getting the fat is good. There are essential fats you need to have. You need to have cholesterol, and you need to have these fat-soluble vitamins that only show up in animal source nutrition, animal fats as well. So these are very important things to have. So eating those things, not being afraid of them, and you want to have some fruits and vegetables, go for it. And if you feel fine doing that, go for it. But if you want to be as best as you possibly can, I think what you do is you start getting rid of those too, because plants have toxins. Plants make a million different defense chemicals to stop animals and insects from eating them. They can disrupt your hormones. They can cause goiters. They can disrupt your thyroid. They can cause neurological dysfunction. They can cause developmental delays and abnormalities. They can be called anti-nutrients, where they block out the absorption of nutrients properly, or get into your body and just strip out different vitamins and minerals from your body if they're already there. You have digestive disruptors like protease inhibitors that are in wheat and soy and many other plants, that they stop your enzyme protease from breaking down even bioavailable protein in meat. And then, a lot of these plant nutrients aren't bioavailable. That's one of the ways that plants defend themselves, by binding these things up in chemical bonds that we can't break. And so we aren't able to access them. This is why we ferment things. This is why we cook things. This is why we soak them in lye, in order to try to lower the toxic load and increase the bioavailability through breaking these chemical bonds. So if you want to just, not have to deal with all that, because it's a lot, you just don't eat them. If you want to just jump into it, you can. You can just jump into just eating high fat meat, and you'll be good. There'll be a transition period. You may have withdrawals from sugar and carbs and other sorts of things. You might feel weird and junky and gross and fluey for a couple of days, or even a week or two. It goes away. You just eat enough meat, eat enough fat. Sometimes you need more salt in the beginning when your body's sort of readjusting. And so you just make sure that you do those things, and you'll be fine. Then you'll just feel, after about 2 weeks, you get most of the crap out of your system, and you'll just feel better than you ever have in your entire life. And your body will just start revamping itself. You'll start shredding fat. And if you're working out, you'll start stacking on muscle. And you'll feel better. And so you'll want to work out more, and you'll want to push yourself, because it makes you feel better when you do push yourself. But if you want to take it a bit more slowly, then you just get rid of some of the worst actors. I think that carbohydrates in general are toxic. We make carbohydrates, but we make it at a physiological level that doesn't go above 4 grams. 4 grams, that's all.
That's nothing, right?
It's nothing, right? It's a level teaspoon of glucose. And that's for your blood sugar, right? So that's throughout your entire circulatory system, and that is capable of running all your physiological processes of every organ, every tissue, and your brain. 4 grams, right? If you go up 1 gram, that's a toxic dose to your body, and your body responds to it as a toxic dose by detoxifying it, by raising your insulin. Why is this? Because glucose and other carbohydrates physically fuse to other molecules called glycation, and you get AGEs, advanced glycation end products. These are damaged molecules that are irreversibly damaged. They have to be recycled and replaced in order to get rid of them, generally. And so this is what kills diabetics, this buildup of damage from glycation, from 1 extra gram of glucose. That's your body just can't deal with that anymore. And so it doesn't happen overnight, but it's over years, over decades. The body just starts breaking down, and eventually you start getting your toes amputated, then your foot, then your ankle, then above your knee, then up to your hip, then your kidneys fail. Now you're on dialysis and get a kidney transplant. you're getting heart disease, and you die, right? So if that's the course for uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, right? And that's 1 extra gram of glucose. So I say get rid of glucose. It's not a good one. All sorts of sugars, and that goes for sweet fruits as well, right? You want some avocado? Fine. Understand that fruits have toxins too, though. They're not clean. If you give a grape to a dog or a cat, they'll get very sick. They could die. Avocado can kill a cat, right? Oh my God, but they're good. No, not necessarily. Oh, but they're a fruit, and the plant wants you to eat the fruit. No, it wants something to eat the fruit, usually birds. And so these things have generally co-evolved with different animal species. Cassowary bird here in Australia, right? They're frugivores. They only eat fruit and berries. And there's about 150 different varieties of fruit that they eat in the tropical rainforests. And every single one of those fruits will kill you. Every single one of those fruits will kill every other animal except the cassowary bird, because the seed doesn't germinate unless it goes through the digestive tract of the cassowary bird. So the plant has to make sure that it goes through cassowary bird. If cassowary bird leaves an area or dies out, those plants die out. And so it's very important. So it has to be very enticing and very appealing to a cassowary bird, and very harmful and detrimental and discouraging
Everything
to anything
else.
Okay. Yeah. So fruits do have toxins. Avocados are less toxic to us than they are to a cat, but that doesn't mean that you're getting away with anything here. There are a lot of oxalates in there. Oxalates are a known poison. Here again, someone, a famous actor here, or at least related to a famous actor, Liam Hemsworth. I'm sure he's famous on his own, but you're always going to be under the shadow of a famous sibling. But in any case, he went plant-based vegan for a long time, and then he put himself in the hospital with acute oxalate poisoning. This is in the news. You can read this, right? And so he was having spinach smoothies for like 3 weeks or something like that. Spinach has a lot of oxalates, and he had massive kidney stones, had to get surgery, and he landed himself in the hospital. 75% of kidney stones are calcium oxalate stones. This is coming from eating oxalates, and it chelates out your calcium. You start lowering your calcium. You can strip and demineralize bones and get weakened bones because of this, and you can get stones as well. And so there are oxalates in avocado. Now, the point I'm making with this is that when you pick a fruit when it's unripe, it has far more toxins in it. So it has toxins, but it has more toxins when it's unripe because the seed's not ready yet. And so the plant does not want anything to touch it and mess with it. It needs to ripen that seed. When was the last time you found a fresh, ripe, tree-picked avocado in the grocery store? It doesn't happen.
Never, right?
They pick them rock hard and green, right? Exactly when you don't want to pick them, because that's how they travel. They'll bruise and mush, and they're being shipped thousands of miles, generally, in order to get them to the store. And then they're rock hard by the time you get them, and you wait for 2 weeks for them to ripen. And right when they're about to be ripened, you miss them. You miss the afternoon that they're ripe, and they're rotten the next day. Damn it, right? And so that's generally people's experience with avocados. And when you do that and you pick it unripe, it doesn't detoxify. The tree has to pull the toxins out, because you pick that, toxins stay in there. They don't just disappear, right? In order for them to go. So they had this, and now we're extrapolating a bit here because the studies that I'm referring to are in tomatoes, but they showed that when you pick tomatoes green, they have far more of these toxins and solanines. They're a nightshade family, like same family as tobacco, and well, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, peppers, capsicums. These are in the nightshade family. They're not good. You're not supposed to eat these things. Most nightshades are deadly to humans, and they'll certainly mess up your dogs and cats. So if you pick them green, they don't detoxify. They don't lower their toxic load. They have a very similar toxic load, and so you could imagine that the same would be true for other fruits as well. So if you want to have some of those, just be mindful of that. If it's in your backyard and it's not sweet and you have an avocado tree, much better than the alternative. When you pick it green, there's 4 times the number of oxalates, and obviously going to be a higher proportion of other toxins as well. So if you're going to get rid of the sugar, you're going to get rid of the sweeteners, you want to have some non-sweet fruits and vegetables. Just be a bit smart about it. Cut out the nightshades, cut out the green fruit that isn't tree ripened, vine ripened, and then try to mix things up, because these plants have different toxins. The different families have different toxins in them. So you don't eat the same plant every day. You don't have spinach every bloody day until you get oxalate poisoning and have to go to the hospital, right? You switch it up, right? You prioritize meat, you prioritize animal fat. That's going to fill you up. You want to have a bit of a salad on it? Fine. Change the salad around. Don't put seed oil salad dressing on it either. And, and then you do
That's
that.
a big one, right?
Yeah. And because no one likes salad, I mean, it's a whole, the Simpsons thing. It's just like, Lisa, no one makes friends with salad. And, you don't make friends with salad. But also, people, I really love salad. It's like, okay, so you eat it dry without dressing? Oh God, no. They want the dressing. They like the oil, dressing.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they want the fat. Well, have animal fats instead of the seed oils, which are very high in linoleic acid, which is toxic to the body and the brain. And so you do that. You do those sorts of things. You make those conscious choices, and you start moving in the right direction. And yes, you will be a victim of confirmation, or not confirmation, but healthy user bias as well, because you're starting to think about that. You're going to start making conscious choices not to do other things that are unhealthy, which is great. You're going to get healthier. So, stop smoking, plant. Stop drinking, plant. Stop doing drugs, plants. Stop plants. And you'll get better. And if you decide at one point, say, hey, look, I'm feeling better and better as I do this. I'm in ketosis. I like how I feel. I'm mixing up the plants. I feel great. I'm eating a ton of meat. Well, maybe I'll just try 30 days, just meat, and see how you go. I think you'll be very surprised, because just dropping that last 5% of the plants, even though you cleaned it up in all those ways that we talked about, it is a dramatic difference. I was doing that. I was just eating spinach, kale, broccoli, and then some lean meat, and I was trying to limit that. I was eating as much greens as I wanted to, and or as I could stomach.
As you could, yeah.
And I was limiting the meat, though, because I wanted to lose. I was just back from Bangladesh. I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to lose fat and get back into rugby. And I felt like garbage. I just never had energy. I was hungry all the time. I didn't feel good, and my body wasn't working well. And I was lifting weights, but the thought of doing a rugby practice, especially mid-season when I came back, I was like, this is not going to work well. And so I didn't go. And so I was trying to get into shape a bit better and then go to practice. And then I dropped the vegetables and started eating a lot more meat. And I lost 23 pounds in 10 days. And I felt amazing. All the inflammation left my body. My back didn't hurt. My joints didn't hurt. My body didn't hurt. I couldn't get sore from working out anymore. My asthma went away. My eyes stopped being red. My eyes were always red. People would always say, like in pictures, you see my eyes just red. Yeah. They're like, oh, you must have been wasted. I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. I didn't drink, but but that was it. Now my eyes, they just stopped being red. My asthma went away. And after 2 weeks, I just felt amazing. I just said, right, time to go back and play rugby. And at 38 years old, I started playing professional rugby again. And I felt great. I was at a dead sprint the whole time. I hadn't played a full season in 3 years. I hadn't run in months because I was in a refugee camp, It's no real exercise going on. And I felt amazing. I could keep up with all the pros that had been training the whole year. It was mid-season, and they were 15 years younger than me. I felt great. I felt fantastic. And 2 weeks later, I went to, that was sort of my 5th training, and I'd been a carnivore for a month at that point. Still fat, still out of shape, but we did a modified bleep test, which is like a fitness test for the team, and I came in like the top 5 out of the whole team. There's like 92 players on all teams. And I've been training for 2 weeks. It's all diet, 100% diet. And I just got better and better and better and better and better. And so it was just dropping, though. Those are the best ones. The only reason I was eating spinach, kale, and broccoli, because everyone says, oh, those are the best ones. They have all these wonderful sulforaphanes and lovely oxalates and things like that. It's just like, Jesus. And, so I dropped those and I started eating a lot more meat. I lost weight immediately. I felt better immediately. And so if people are able to do that and sort of wean down and they go, okay, look, things are going in the right direction. I'm feeling a lot better. Might as well give it a try. You will be shocked at how much of a difference that makes, just getting rid of those stupid leaves.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen it even in myself and people I work with and friends, family, everything like that. Just increasing the overall red meat consumption. And it's super easy to
Mm.
do with like steak, just have like at least one, steak a day. Like if you're really good, have some ribeye, and everyone just feels like better, like honestly, like instantly. Like
Mhm.
within a week, the anecdotal response from basically everyone is I
Mm.
have way more energy in the morning. I'm less puffy around the face. I notice it the next time I tell them about it, and then I see them like a week later or 2 weeks later, and their face is just leaned out dramatically. And,
Mm.
they just look so much better. And then
Mhm.
they perform better at the gym, or, they perform better in exercise. They're stronger. They have better actual cardiovascular systems. They're performing better for longer as well. Every metric basically improves. Brain fog's gone away. They're performing better at their career, whatever that may be. And like I said, every single metric's basically better just from not being scared of cholesterol, because that's the main thing. That's the propaganda that's been pushed
Mm.
for how many decades now is red meat's the enemy. Don't have any red meat. And most of the studies that they're doing to say this is they're not really defining what red meat is. And they're including like a McDonald's hamburger is
Yeah.
classified technically as red meat. So correlate McDonald's hamburger, diabetes, overweight, obese, so they're saying, okay, red meat's bad, when it couldn't really be further from the truth. It's really like the species appropriate diet, what you're talking about. Same with a cow. Like if you feed a cow grass, the quality of the meat is going to be much higher. The nutrient quantity in that meat is going to be much higher than a grain, soy-fed counterpart. A cow that's fed grain its whole life, you can see the difference in the meat, even in the color, and the
Mm.
taste is different. The quantity of the nutrients is far different as well. And it's the exact same for humans, like you were saying. You just want to eat a species-appropriate diet, and plants were only ever really eaten out of necessity. What you were saying before as well is only when we couldn't kill some animal would we have plants out of a necessity, and usually it would be like berries or fruits, and if we couldn't get that, then it's onto the rough stuff, like your leaves and things like that, which is obviously the worst out of all of them. One thing I wanted to get your opinion on is dairy and dairy products. Are you an advocate for dairy products? Do you drink dairy yourself or have dairy of any description?
So when I talk about all these things, I really try to talk about optimal. What is optimal? And so, I'm not trying to say that everyone has to only eat meat and do everything exactly the way I do. I feel far and away the best when I only eat meat, and specifically red meat, grass-fed and finished regeneratively raised red meat. Even better. That's the best I've ever felt in my entire life is when I got a 10-year-old cow that had only eaten grass its entire life on a regenerative farm. That was amazing. And I felt supercharged. It was like Energon cube. I just felt amazing. And so so that's the best. So I'm talking about optimal here. So the thing is you can still have relative degrees of health and certainly be a lot healthier than 99.99% of the population out there by including some whole fruits and veggies and some dairy and some all these other things. But just speaking about what's optimal, what I think is the pinnacle, and then people can add in whatever they want down there if they think that that's fine for them, or they don't really want to be optimal, or they're happy with a bit of the detraction from their health. But what I'm saying, here's ideal, and then we can talk below that. But not everyone has to be my definition of ideal. But talking about that, I don't think dairy is ideal. Meat is a meal. Meat has all the best nutrients in it, and does the best for people. Now, there are a lot of people that do very well with dairy, have a bit of cheese and some plain Greek yogurt. It's very good, especially if we've had to take a bunch of antibiotics or something like that. Very good to have some plain Greek yogurt, live culture yogurt, to repopulate your microbiome. That can be very helpful. Having a bit of cheese as a condiment to melt some cheese onto a burger patty to help with the flavor, fine. A little bit of sour cream mixed in with some ground beef or mince, fine. Is it as good as if you didn't use it? I don't think so. But if it helps you, enjoy your meal and do do a more animal-based approach, then that's great. The Maasai are very healthy. They drink a lot of milk. They drink raw milk, though. Raw milk is very different than pasteurized, homogenized milk. Weston A. Price is a dentist in the early 1900s, and he went around to these different indigenous populations and found that some of these people were extraordinarily healthy when they were just eating a lot of meat and animal fats and not really much of anything else. And then people in the same family or the same village, they were sort of eating more Western food, plant food, crap food. This is long before processed food too, or long before processed food made it out to those regions anyway. And he found that things like raw milk were one of the best things that you could give somebody to catch them up and fill up these nutritional deficits. So in those contexts, milk's great, and for people that have nutritional deficiencies, for people in India that don't have access to meat for religious or economic reasons, dairy is really important. It's very important, having the ghee, the butter, and the raw milk and things like that. That's very important. If I was structuring just the perfect diet, I wouldn't include dairy. I would just fatty red meat. But it can be very healthy and very beneficial to addition to a diet, especially if you have a less nutrient dense diet and you need to get a lot of these nutrients and fat soluble nutrients. Milk is great for that. Cheese is very good for that. Yogurt is very good for that, especially for the microbiome. There are people that don't do well with dairy at all, especially people with autoimmunity. It can raise inflammation. So there's casein is one of the milk proteins, and there's A1 casein and A2 casein. And the A1 casein seems to be more pro-inflammatory. A2 is less. So if you say, okay, well, this is A2 milk, that's better. Well, it is better, but it still can cause inflammation. And people, especially with autoimmunity, need to be very careful of it because they can trigger their autoimmunity because of that inflammation, possibly from the casein, possibly from something else, possibly because of something that the cow is being fed that they're not supposed to eat and gets into the milk. It's hard to say, but people do seem to react to that. Well, just in the same way that people with autoimmunity may respond negatively to a pork chop from a pig that's raised in a factory farm, being fed a bunch of corn and soy, and they're not designed to eat corn and soy, and so they can't filter out all the toxins. They can filter out a lot of them, but some of that stuff, especially the linoleic acid, gets up and builds up in their tissue, and so they have a very high level of linoleic acid, which again is toxic to your body and your brain, and very pro-inflammatory, and your body reacts to this. And so people with autoimmune issues, they eat chicken, eggs, or pork, farmed fish that have been fed this garbage. They can react to that as well. So the same thing could be true of the milk and the dairy. So if you're just doing meat and you've done this for a month or two, and you want to add in a bit of cheese and add a slice of cheese onto something and melt that onto something, and you do well with that, great. If you want to have a glass of raw milk every now and then with a steak, fine. I would be careful with the carbs because there's definitely enough lactose in milk to give you an insulin spike and cause a problem. We go back to our model where we were saying, 1 extra gram of sugar or glucose is toxic to the body. Well, you're just pumping in dozens, if not hundreds of grams of glucose into your body when you drink milk, depending on how much milk you drink. And then your body responds to this as a toxin by trying to detoxify it by raising your insulin to bring that level down below 4 grams. But insulin doesn't just affect blood sugar. And this is something that the Diabetes Association of America and elsewhere needs to figure out, because they're just being paid and controlled by the pharmaceutical companies that are just wanting to sell insulin. And so the official recommendation has been, at least in the past, that there's no limit on carbohydrates. Eat as much carbohydrates as you want. Just make sure you're using a corresponding amount of insulin. You need enough insulin, particularly for type 1 diabetics. Well, of course they'd say that because they want you to have all the carbohydrates in the world, so you have to use all the insulin in the world. But insulin doesn't just lower blood sugar. So sometimes, insulin, blood sugar goes up, insulin brings it down. Great, no problem. Insulin has over 100 different effects in your body. It's a very, very potent hormone in your body. It controls a lot of different things, or at least it influences a lot of different things. Over 100 different things. And so you want it at the right level. because it's at that level, it affects everything at that same level. And when you raise it artificially, double, triple, quadruple, quintuple it or more by eating sugar and carbohydrates, now that's going up and it's affecting everything at that heightened level, and everything goes out of balance. So it's not what you want. It completely disrupts your entire metabolism, kicks you into an entirely different metabolic state, and that you're running on sugar instead of being able to mobilize your fat cells and make blood sugar, make glycogen, make ketones. Now you're just trying to stuff this stuff into your body as much as you can. So I avoid carbohydrates, and that includes in milk. Every now and then I get my hands on some raw milk. It's illegal in Australia. It's just like crazy to me. But it's not in America, at least not in certain states like Washington. So I'll be back there, and there's a store by my brother's house that has raw milk, and I think once every year or two they have some in stock. It generally goes out really quickly. My brother says, "Hey, I got this gallon of raw milk," and it's like, that thing doesn't even make it to the fridge. It's just like, it's so damn good. It says that sweetness, because my taste for sweetness is so much more sensitive,
right? Yeah,
exactly. So when I drink a glass of milk, it tastes like I'm drinking ice cream. It's like, this is too good, and that's the point. You're trying to encourage the kid, like, drink this, because you want that energy to grow. So I look at that as sort of an addictive thing. I don't want that. I recognize that as a compulsion that I want to avoid. There's also mild opiates in milk and dairy, so you can eat this stuff compulsively. And when I tell people, like, yes, you can have some dairy, but eat it infrequently and only as a condiment, they go, "Ooh, I can eat dairy," and that's what their brain hears, and they just run in. They're just eating chunks of cheese like hand fruit, just mauling on it. And so don't do that. And that's why I avoid it too, because it's just, I'm pouring it. I was like, well, that was amazing and delicious. Like, maybe just one more. Oh, okay, well, maybe just one more. You know what? I'm already halfway through the bottle. Like, what's the point? I mean, I might as well just finish this off. And so, I don't want to do that. So I avoid that specifically. And but dairy is a gray area. Some people do very well with it, but I think it's something that you can end up eating way too much of. You can absolutely overconsume it. Certainly with milk, you have to be careful. And it's also it's a very common thing that people that weight loss stall. So people that are trying to lose weight and they eating a lot of dairy, they end up not losing the weight that they want, or even start putting on weight. Because again, I think you can compulsively eat this stuff because of the carbohydrates, certainly, but also the opiates and something else in there that just makes us want to eat more and more of it. And people tend to eat the same amount of dairy, and they don't change the amount of meat that they eat. Meat's very satiating. They eat it and then they stop, and they just eat the exact same amount of meat regardless of the amount of dairy that they eat. So you can just overeat. If you're eating meat and you're only eating fatty meat, then your body will actually tell you when to stop. It'll just stop tasting good. And when you add in other things like carbohydrates, sugar, or dairy, it changes that. And so you can't listen to your natural signals, and you can overeat. So something to think about.
Yeah, and a really important thing to note is, just like the red meat, obviously the regeneratively farmed, grass-fed, grass-finished, steak is going to be much better than the McDonald's burger patty, right? The same is true with dairy as well. Like you kind of alluded to, is your sliced American cheese, that's those little squares in a plastic, that's not the same as like a glass of raw milk, and having that raw, unpasteurized, unhomogenized milk, you actually get a lot more of the nutrients from the milk as the store-bought counterpart. But unfortunately, it is illegal in a lot of places. And I know you're in Western Australia, so afterwards I might tell you where you can find some raw milk pretty easily after the podcast. But one last thing I did want to ask you about is, so obviously red meat's like the king, so it's pretty obvious that's the case. That's what we've been eating since the dawn of time, basically, right? What's your opinion on raw meat and eating the meat raw rather than cooking the meat? Because just like your vegetables, you cook the vegetables to lower the amount of anti-nutrients in them and also make the nutrients more bioavailable in the vegetables themselves. But in meat, the opposite can be said, and the opposite is definitely true with dairy, right? When you heat the milk up, you're going to lose a lot of the digestive enzymes. You're going to lose a lot of the everything. Every single nutrient and vitamin is going to be denatured or damaged or completely reduced to zero. And the heated up version is a lot less healthy than the raw, naturally occurring version in the raw dairy. And what's your opinions on raw meat itself?
Yeah, so the thing is that with raw meat, as long as you're in an area that you can source meat that's safe, it's not going to have parasites, it's not going to have contamination from food handling errors, very safe and very good for you, very nutritious. It does have a lot of these things, a lot more taurine and glutamine that get denatured when you cook meat, that will be in there. And there are a lot of studies that suggest that more taurine. Now, taurine is not a so-called essential nutrient, meaning that or amino acid, meaning that we make it ourselves, we synthesize it ourselves. But just like carnitine, we do see people improve and have improved health markers and outcomes, associations with higher levels of dietary taurine and carnitine. So that can be beneficial. Now, when you cook things, you do denature nutrients, but you also make more bioavailable. So there's a bit of a give and take. And so if you're eating sort of seared on the outside, blue on the inside, might be that's the best of both worlds. You're sort of opening up some that by cooking on the outside, you're cooking off any bacteria on the outside, and you're leaving the inside nice and raw with a bunch of enzymes and nutrients and taurine that are not getting cooked out and denatured. So that could be a good compromise. And as long as you're confident that the meat that you're eating isn't going to have parasites, in the Western world, you just don't really run that risk anymore because it's so thoroughly checked. Trichinosis there hasn't been a case of confirmed trichinosis in farmed pig stock in America in I think 25 years now. So this is something that's very, very well controlled and well regulated. And if something comes back contaminated, they pull the whole thing. They do a recall on that whole batch of meat, and that actually happens very rarely. So there are very good safeguards in check, at least in Western countries as well. If you're not in a place that has as rigorous of safeguards, then you have to make that decision yourself. But we have been cooking meat for a very long time. We have evidence, pretty good evidence, that we've been cooking meat for at least 800,000 years. That's 500,000 years before Homo sapiens existed as a species, at least. The oldest reckoning. Yes, it was a long time. And so we think we have evidence of even heating throughout the meat, throughout the bones. It's not like hot spot here, cold spot here. So even heat throughout the entire bones and carcass, which suggests that we had like rudimentary ovens 800,000 years ago, right? So if we've had ovens for 800,000 years ago, we probably had fire and cooking meat longer. And people, and depending on who you talk to, the different sort of paleoanthropologists, archaeologists that study this sort of thing, such as Professor Bill Schindler from University of Maryland. He's a professor of archaeology and paleoanthropology. He's retired there since, but he was a professor there. And I've done a couple interviews with him. He's a very, very interesting guy. He brilliant for your podcast if you wanted to have him on. Very nice guy. And he studies these populations, and he was saying that he thinks they probably had fire and likely been cooking actually probably about 2 million plus years, because when the ice ages started about 2.5 million years ago, when the ice age, we didn't have polar ice caps before 2.5 million years ago. Those started at that point. They started spreading down. We have this ice age, and that sort of ebbed back a bit and then came back and then ebbed and came back. And so we're going this ebb and flow of ice ages. Then we're sort of in the middle of the warmer period at the moment. Maybe not the middle, maybe we're close onto the going back towards an ice age. That was certainly the thought back in the 60s and 70s.
Are you denying climate change, Anthony? Isn't it the cows?
All the time, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying with the ice ages. We've had massive climate change with the ice ages. We've had ice covering most of the globe, and then it didn't, and yet here we are, and we still have Eskimos, we still have polar bears, right? So this is there are massive changes in the environment, and that's the whole point. Life adapts. And so it's the idea is that, well, if it happens so quickly, then life won't be able to adapt. But so far anyway, with these massive changes that we have, I mean, look from summer to winter, we have massive 100-degree changes in temperature sometimes. So and then with the ice ages, you have this ebb and flow of these extreme weather changes, and life adapts and life finds a way, and that's the idea. And our ancestors, Homo habilis, during that period when the ice shelf started coming down, that actually made us manifest our destiny as apex predators, because there were early lines of humanity that were actually more plant-based than animal-based. Homo habilis was largely animal-based. As stone tools, they were hunting animals, killing them, eating them, and developing their brain, because they needed to figure out, how the hell do I get this big ass animal? I don't have big teeth and claws and all these sorts of things. I had to figure out how to do this with tactics and tools and potentially fire as well. And then when the ice ages came down, people say, oh, they just ran away to the equator. No, they didn't. The fossil record is very clear. Homo habilis tracked up into the ice and actually went to more cold and inhospitable areas. Yeah. So what Professor Schindler thinks is that probably a lot easier to do that if you have fire. You're not going to just jump into an ice age unless you have some sort of control and mastery of a heating element and your environment. All the fire myths, Prometheus and every other civilization has a fire myth about how revolutionary this was, how it brought humanity out of ashes and darkness and mud to just basically be kings over the world. And you can imagine that you're in an ice age and everything sucks. And then all of a sudden you have fire, and it's just like, this is unreal. I mean, there was a time when that was in living memory, and somebody's grandfather was just like, the first generation born into just growing up with fire, like first generation growing up with the iPhone, was like, what is this? This is just normal. You don't get it. Like, we just had to, like, this sucked before that. It's just like me trying to explain to my niece that, like, when I was in high school, I actually had to, like, if you were going to meet someone somewhere, you actually had to plan that a day in advance. We're going to be there at this time, and you had to show up, because you couldn't just text them and go, oh, we're running late, or I'm not going to make it today. You had to get your ass there and be there, because they were going to be there waiting for you. You had no way of telling them that you weren't going to come. So they were just going to wait for you. And if you're that guy who just leaves people, hanging, just stands them up a few times, like, you're not going to get invited out to hang out again, So you just had to do that. So,
totally.
There's just changes. And so that was in living memory with the fire that revolutionized things. So he thinks that we've had fire for a lot longer than that. But just as an aside, though, a lot of those lines of humans actually died out. There were humans around that time that were more plant-based. They didn't make it. They didn't make it through the ice ages. Homo habilis did. And it was actually a massive extinction point, bottleneck in survival, where a lot of these other lines died out. It was the ones that were able to figure out how to thrive during an ice age as apex predators, as hunters, and figure out how to take down mammoths and mastodons and giant sloths and cave bears and things like that. They're the ones who survived, right? And that catapulted our evolution. Our height and cranial capacity grew exponentially larger after that. We were growing at a pretty steady state, and then ice ages hit, bam, it was just this exponential growth. And then about 10,000-15,000 years ago, with the advent of agriculture, our brain size going up, down, straight down. It didn't go up and then tail off. It went up, straight down.
The side-by-side image of the skulls, pre-agriculture and after agriculture, it's like the big Chad skull with the massive jaw and the straight teeth, and then the huge head as well. And then right next to it, it's like literally half the size, super narrow face, like the classic, plant-based sort of looking dude,
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna just because I went on 15 tangents there, but to answer your question about the raw meat, I think that we've been cooking meat for such a long time that we're more than adapted to cooked meat. Cats really can't do cooked meat. They have to have the taurine and other nutrients that get cooked out, or they get very sick. There's been multi-generational studies on that with cats, and they can't actually breed past 3 generations. They get sicker and smaller and weaker until they finally can't even reproduce after the 3rd generation. And then when given, and that's just with cooked meat, that's not with kibble and all this other bullshit. It's meat, but it's just cooked meat. And so then they put them back on raw meat, and then they're healthy again, and they can reproduce and they can have kittens, but they don't actually get back to the physical stature and cranial capacity and skeletal development of their raw meat counterparts for 4 generations. So there's these multi-generational
huge lag,
epigenetic knock-on effect. Yeah, it's really interesting. So we're not in that category. We've been cooking meat for at least 800,000 years, probably 1 million or more years longer than that. So whatever happens to cooked meat when we cook it, we're well used to it and adapted to it at this point. I think that it probably did confer a survival advantage because of parasites. Wild animals, do have a high parasite burden, and you cook these things, it kills the parasites, but only if you're cooking it all the way through. So I think in order to gain the benefit from killing parasites, we probably did have to cook these things. But then again, the Native Americans with the buffalo, they would dry the meat out, they would crush it up into powder, and they would mix it with rendered fat, tallow, and that would make pemmican. That's what they would eat the rest of the year. They'd have a buffalo drop, basically, or a herd of buffalo over the cliff, and that would feed their tribe for the rest of the year. And so that's raw. It's dried, but it's raw. So I think nutritionally, I think it's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with eating raw meat, as long as it's not contaminated or having parasites or anything like that. I don't think we require it, because I think we're more than adapted to cooked meat because we've been doing it for so long. But I think people just eat what they feel best on. Like, I much prefer the taste of less cooked meat or even raw meat. I'll sear the outside. I generally keep the inside basically raw. Sometimes even cold. I get it out of the fridge, I sear the outside, the inside is still cold. And so it's that tastes great to me. I really like that. I like the taste of raw meat. And I feel good doing it. And we it's sort of a privilege here in Western countries and other countries that have a good control over the safety of the livestock. That's not always available everywhere in the world. So just people need to keep that in mind and, just be a bit safe with it.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. The more steak I do eat, the less cooked I like it, So I sort of started out medium rare, now rare, now it's blue, and now sometimes, like you said, raw, just straight out of the fridge. But
I've done that where I was a bit lazy and I was like gonna cook something, but I was just like, I just really want to eat. And I had this steak, because I'll like prep steaks and I'll put them on drying racks and like wire racks and dry them out in the fridge, and they just taste a lot better. The water evaporates out of it and they get more, they brown a lot better, and they concentrates the flavor more. It tastes great. It's a very good trick. And I was just looking at this thing, and I'm like, man, I just sort of want to eat it. And I'm like, screw it. I just started just eating this ribeye, just raw. And I'm like, this is delicious. So I like videotape myself, just eating this thing privately. It's just like, really, our teeth don't work for this? I'm like, mine's working pretty well.
It does work pretty well. It cuts through it quite easily, I find.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's awesome, man. Well, I wanted to, say thanks so much for coming on. I know we've been going for a while now. Can you just let everyone know, obviously, where to find you, like social media, everything like that, and if they want to reach out to you, maybe look into your clinic and get help from you, like where would they go to find that?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's been fun. So hopefully people
it's been fun.
like that and learn something. So my main thing is my YouTube channel is just Anthony Chaffee MD. Same with my Instagram. Those are my 2 main social media platforms, and they're both Anthony Chaffee MD. My Patreon's Anthony Chaffee MD. If people want to see my videos early and get sort of weekly Q&A sessions that I have with my members, and my podcast is just called The Plant Free MD, sort of going on that whole reason why I started doing carnivore diet was just because I stopped eating plants. And that's the main thing. So those are where people can find me online. I have other things, but those are the main ones. And then Twitter's Anthony _Chaffee. And then my clinic is here. I work in neurosurgery, but I'm that's not where people can really see me for this capacity. I have a private practice in metabolic health, and sometimes called like functional medicine or preventative medicine. And that's just here in Perth, in Mount Hawthorne. Got the Hobart Clinic in Mount Hawthorne, and in Perth. And if people want to come in and see me there, they're more than welcome to make an appointment. We're sort of booked out a bit, but we can still get people in if they want. And then I do online consultations on a nutritional side of things. It's not like telehealth or whatever, because people can be all over the world, and obviously I can't give direct medical advice to people where I'm not licensed. So. But for purely nutritional advice, they can find me on. They can sign up for a Zoom consultation. That I try to make time for that outside of work. So I'm basically working from early in the morning until I finish the clinic or the hospital at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and then I do consultations until usually around 10 or 11. So just to try to help people, because there's
a lot of people to help.
Yeah. So people can find that through my link tree. Like if they go to my Instagram. They can find my links in my Instagram page, and if they want to book a consultation, they can do that. Or if they just want, I try to make everything available for free online. This isn't my job. I have a job. I really enjoy my job. This actually takes away from my job. And so I just want the information to be out there. I want people to be well. I want people to be healthy, so they don't need doctors. They don't need to come see me. I don't need to tell them all this stuff. They just know it. And then, and then me working in neurosurgery, I just help them if they have a horrible accident and they need surgery and to fix it. That's what I want to do. And so, I want to make that information available to everyone. So in my YouTube channel, there's a playlist called Getting Started on a Carnivore Diet. And that's a curated list of videos that I think are very important for people to go through and understand when thinking about changing their diet for their health. And if everything in there just answers their questions and they don't need to do a consult, that's even better. I'm more than happy to not be needed in that capacity.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, like I said, again, absolute pleasure to have you on. And yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.